So for the background on the um, Western shaker, all I did is take a piece of gray artisan cardstock and then the Prize Ribbon and Villainous Potion Distress Oxides, both of which are available at Country Craft Creations, and I just ink blended onto that gray to create kind of my sunset, early evening sky background that I did for the shaker. So that was cut to 8 by 8. I have an 8 by 8 piece of lightweight chipboard. I'm just gluing my background down on top of that. To put my stars in, I'm using the fairy lights from Country Craft Creations. These are really reasonable. They're about a little over $2 a package. They come with the batteries, and you can change the batteries out in these if you needed to or wanted to. The way this is going to go together, you'd have a really hard time changing them out, but it is possible. So they're kind of wrapped up. You have to unwrap them when you get them, and then there's also like a little plastic piece you pull out of the battery compartment. And so I'm just counting to see how many lights there are on the string, and there are 20 lights on each string, and they are fairly bright. So I'm just going to take that and take my Crocodile, and I'm just going to randomly punch some holes in my backdrop. So this is through both the cardstock and the lightweight chipboard that it's glued to. Just punching some holes randomly, like where I kind of want my lights to show through. And of course, the regular Crocodile is not quite long enough to get into the middle here, so I'm going to have to go find my big one. But these are going to sit right behind those holes, so you'll be able to see the light shining through the holes like stars. All right, so I've grabbed my bigger Crocodile, and what I'm doing is just turning these on and kind of figuring out where I want them to go. And I figured the easiest way to kind of determine this without having to, keep turning it over and looking and whatnot was to just kind of lay them on the back side here, hold them over the couple of holes I have already, and anywhere that I want them that I don't have a hole, I'm just marking with a pencil. And doing it this way, I'm doing two things. I'm not only figuring out where they need to go, but I'm also making sure they're spaced right so that I have a light that will line up behind each hole exactly, rather than having them either not quite reach or having them too close together. So you'll see me kind of, put one down and kind of play with it a little bit to get it where I want to go, so that they're not like, in like perfect lines or something. I'm trying to be a little more random with this, which, as we all know, is not the easiest thing to do, but it does work. So as I go along, I'm just kind of holding where I want my next one to be, holding down the one prior so that it stays where I need it to go, incorporating, the handful of other holes I did punch. I don't want to go too close to the outside of this, even though the way this is going to go together, it wouldn't necessarily get covered up, but I don't want to run the risk that I'm accidentally covering one of these up. So just a few more to go here. And somehow, even though I did this and I was trying to be really careful, I still ended up with like 2 extra holes. I'm not sure what I did. I think there was just stuff on the back of my lightweight chipboard that I mistook for one of my pencil marks that wasn't a pencil mark. That, and I think I moved a couple of them as I was punching, and I don't know. Anyway, so here I'm trying to figure out, and I've really got like a couple left, so I'm trying to go back. Actually, that's probably how I ended up with too many holes, because I was trying to backtrack and get all of my lights in here, and I probably didn't erase something that I should have erased, but that's okay. Where the extra ones ended up being, it was somewhere where it was really easy to just put something over them so you didn't have just like this random hole sitting there. Okay, so I've got those figured out. I'm going to turn those lights off, and then I'm going to take my big crocodile and figure out how to change which hole punch setting I have on it to the tinier one, and get this, start punching the holes in my chipboard. All right, so I have the holes in my chipboard. What I'm going to do, just so the lights aren't too bright, is I've got just a plain piece of vellum here that I'm going to cut down to 7 7/8 by 7 7/8, and I'm going to adhere that on the back of my chipboard there where my lights are going to go, just so that they're not too harsh. This is going to kind of mute this a little bit, and if I could have found my colored vellum, I would have gone with like a yellow or something, just to mute it even more, but I don't know what I've done with my colored vellum. I used to have a bunch of it. I've just misplaced it for now, which, you know, story of my life. So to adhere this down, I'm just going to use score tape. You're not going to see this, you know, I mean, this is clearly like the back side of the project, so you're not going to see this, so it doesn't really matter that I'm using just plain old score tape as opposed to an adhesive meant for vellum that's, you know, going to kind of disappear on the vellum. So I'm just going around getting that score tape down so that I can then put this on the back of my chipboard. Of course, just kind of burnishing that down with my fingers and then getting the backing off of one side to start with, or I'm sorry, two sides to start with. Maybe three? Yeah, we're going to go for three. Sorry, I recorded this like a week ago without sound, so there we go. I have to figure out what I'm doing. Okay, so apparently I'm pulling all of the backing off, but I know I'm going to start just like on the bottom and kind of line it up, and then very slowly kind of roll it down to lay it down so that it gets on there and nothing's hanging over the edge. Okay, so now I've got just some plain old Scotch tape, and I'm literally just going to go around on the back of this and tape my lights down over the holes. Very simple, very straightforward. Okay, so I've got my lights taped down. I'm just coming in with some thin score tape strips. And I'm not sure where I got these from. I've got like 2 or 3 packages of them, and they're longer, like 1/8-inch strips. You could use the wider stuff, but because I've got some of the lights going really close to the top, I did go with this thinner score tape, or not score tape, foam tape, not score tape. And I'm just going around the outside edge on the back of the chipboard piece. I'm just getting that adhered down. And of course, you know, there's always trimming and adjusting when it comes to the score tape. I keep saying score tape. Foam tape strips. And Tammy does have some really super, super narrow ones in the store. They're not quite this long, but they would work as well. So I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm actually, you'll see that I put it down all the way across down here where this the little battery pack and the little spot to turn this on and off goes. I do end up adjusting that, but I believe I did adjust that off camera, so I apologize. Okay, so here is the last one there. I'm trying to not pull it off the paper if I don't have to. And this is where, like I said, I didn't quite leave a spot for my battery pack, but I did adjust it off camera. So what I've got done here at this point is I have taken some 1/2-inch strips of chipboard. Okay, so I just took it from my scraps, I cut it, and I put that down over on top of that foam tape that I ran around the back side of the project there. And so what I'm doing here, and I did leave them hanging off the edge on the front, what I'm going to do here is just continue to build this up on the back. The reason we're doing this is because the battery pack is thicker than my foam tape that I used. I don't want to waste a bunch of foam tape on the back side of this, so instead I'm going to use, like I said, because I've got so many scraps of chipboard, so I'm just using chipboard strips that I've cut down to a 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to layer these up around on the back side of this. This is going to reinforce it. It's going to raise it up so that the battery pack, so this will sit flat even with the battery pack in it. And I think I did 3 strips on each side there all the way around, and that got it just about even with the top of that battery pack. So I am just using plain old art glitter glue to put those down. I didn't cut those with my dolly because, of course, it's kind of hard to cut little bitty pieces like that with a dolly. What I have is just an old blade that I put in my Fiskars trimmer that I have it just marked like with a Sharpie, so I know it's a duller blade, but it will still cut through chipboard. But that way I'm not ruining good blades in that trimmer to cut chipboard. So, excuse me. Just going to go ahead and keep gluing those down. And like I said, it's either 3 or 4 strips all the way around. I honestly don't remember what I ended up doing. It kind of looks like probably 3 strips on each side. And they're not going to be, they don't have to be exact because the way we're going to wrap the top part of this, you're never going to see these. So they don't have to be exact, they don't have to be perfect, but they do need to be squared up with the project itself so that they're not bigger than 9 by 9, because that's ultimately going to be the finished size of this project. And that's partially too why they're hanging off the edge as you're putting those down there, is because they're widening out that 8 by 8 piece so that when we set our main part of our frame on top of this, it's sitting up above where these are. Okay, so I did do 3 apiece. Okay, I did also run some more of that foam tape around on top of the first row of those around the outside edge of my little background there. And for my mountains, I just took craft, I'm sorry, not craft, I took brown artisan and the, oh my gosh, I can't think, rustic wilderness distress oxide to kind of, you know, give those a darker green feel. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a 9x9 piece of chipboard, and I'm just gluing that onto the back of that frame. It's covering up the rest of my wires, and it's getting everything nice and solid essentially. So I've got another 9x9 piece here that I've cut an 8x8 frame into, so 1/2 inch on each side. And this is going to sit just slightly up because I did use, again, that skinny foam tape around the outside edge of my lightweight chipboard piece where my stars are. And I was just giving that a minute to dry there so that nothing shifts on me, because of course we don't want it to shift. I think I was actually like online talking to somebody while I was doing this, so if I pause like in weird intervals, that's why. So again, 9x9 chipboard, you're going to cut this down to a frame with an 8-inch opening. I'm just making sure everything's going to line up here. So this one is going to sit on here, and what I did is I cut my first frame and then I traced it onto my second piece of cardstock rather than measuring in and cutting like I normally would do. That way I know they're going to line up exactly and they're going to be the same. So I'm getting the backing off the foam tape. And of course, you know, there's some shorter pieces here, so this will take just a minute to get them all off. And of course, I can't get a hold of them because, you know, that's how this goes. There we go. And then I'm literally just going to drop that frame down on top of those little pieces of foam tape. Okay, so there we go. If you wanted to stop at this point and wrap the outside of your chipboard, you could, but because I'm going to make this into a shaker and there's going to be acetate involved and that kind of thing, I'm not going to do that at this point. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to cut my other frame. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to go through and do my foam tape. So this is the normal foam tape rolls. And as you can see, I've got like a bunch of partial ones. So I'm going to use up my 2 partial ones before I really get into that other roll that's a little bit fuller. And this is the normal foam tape, not the giant roll that's the thinner foam tape. This is just the normal width of foam tape and height of foam tape. I'm not sure what the actual measurement is, but there's a thinner version that comes on a really, really big roll, and then there's the thicker version that comes on the smaller rolls. This is the thicker version. So I'm just going to go around the outside of this, and I'm actually going to go around 3 times. So you're going to have 3 layers of the foam tape. This way we can do our shaker. We can get it up high enough that we can do some other dimensional embellishments in there, because I did do the thin foam tape behind my different little, you know, southwest deserty mountains there. I did do that, those with the thinner foam tape, so they are popped up to give them some dimensions so that you can tell there is some dimension there. When I'm doing my layers like this, if I'm doing more than 1 layer with the foam tape to do a shaker, I do like to pay attention to where my seams are, so basically where one piece of foam tape ends and the next begins, because I do like to, when I run my next round of foam tape, I do like to try to go over those areas where there's seams so that there's a solid piece that goes across there, just to help reinforce those seams. So you'll see me do that as well. And that was the end of that roll. Because even though you still see foam tape on there, it doesn't come off of the roll very easily at that point. Okay, so we are finishing up the second row of the foam tape. And we're going to pull the backing off. You'll see I'm pulling the backing off of across the bottom there. I'm just kind of bending those other two up because, again, I'm going across that seam where the foam tape ended, so that I'm sealing off those pieces entirely. So I'm going to pull the backing off. I'm going to keep pulling the backing off because I'll bet you anything I'm talking to somebody off screen there. And again, I'm going over those seams in those corners. Not that when I haven't, staggered those seams, that I've ever had an issue, because I haven't, but it's just, I don't know. I think it probably kind of reinforces it. I might be wrong. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. This is how I like to do them. All right, so I think that is, excuse me, the last little piece of foam tape I'm putting down right there. Okay, so there is that. I'm just kind of pushing them down, making sure everything's good. And I'm going to set that to the side for now, and I'm going to cut my other frame. So this one I will cut on camera. So I traced the frame that we put down on top of our little scene there onto this one, so that I'm cutting them so that they should match up exactly. Which, if I cut it right to start with, they should have matched up exactly anyway, but sometimes you don't cut them exactly right. So in this one, I'm just lining this up in my Fiskars trimmer. You could do this with a craft knife. And of course, it's going to slide on me because I'm not paying attention. You could do this with a craft knife and a ruler when you've marked where you need it to go. I was not doing that. I was just kind of running it in there, and then I finish it with a craft knife. Actually, I might have actually cut these all the way through. I'm not really sure. I guess we'll both find out here in a minute, won't we? So we're going to go around. And again. And I've got it turned the way I've got the trimmer turned, so I can see those measurements on there, and I can stop my blade where I need to stop it, so that I'm stopping at 1/2 inch from each end. Okay, so I'm going to move that out of the way. I'm going to finish this off with my craft knife, because now I've got those grooves where I can just put that in there and just drag that down. That is the Cricut knife. I love my Cricut knife. It's really easy to hold. It doesn't end up cramping up my hand. And the blades, when they're new, which this one is not, are insanely sharp. Like, I cut myself on it at least every couple of months. Even knowing how sharp they are, I still manage to cut myself with it because I don't pay attention. But totally the best knife, craft knife, I think I've ever used. Okay, you'll see there I kind of got it a little bit checking to see, because I kind of slipped there a little bit. It does take a couple of times coming back through like that. I just have found I get better results when I start it in the trimmer and at least get that little groove going, that I can then just run my craft knife through to cut these kind of things out. I seem to have better luck doing it that way. Which, if you have a rotary trimmer, obviously it's much harder to do this. So, okay, so we've got our frame now. I'm just going to set it on top of that, make sure everything lines up, and it does. And now we are going to wrap our frame. So we are going to start with a piece of 12 by 12 cardstock. We are going to score this at 7/8 of an inch. and 1.5 inches on all 4 sides. So again, 7/8 and 1.5. Turn it again, 7/8, 1.5. And one more time, turn it all the way, 7/8 and 1.5. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this in my trimmer. Actually, I'm going to lay my frame on there, make sure everything lines up right, which it does. So your frame should sit kind of on, or well, not kind of, the frame should sit inside the second score line. So the 1.5 inch score line, that should set perfectly inside that. So what I'm going to do, and this doesn't have to be super exact, but you don't want to cut through your score lines. What I'm going to do is line up my score line at 1/2 inch. I'm going to start my blade, or my second score line at 1/2 inch. I'm going to start my blade 1/2 inch in from the second score line. And I'm just going to go across. Actually, I might be going 1 inch. I don't know. We'll see here in a second. I might have gone, well, maybe it is only 1/2 inch. No, it might be 1 inch because because this is basically, you're cutting the middle part of this out so that you can adhere your frame down and then wrap the inside part of your frame. So yeah, it does look like I'm going at least 1 inch in there, which would make sense because the way I'm going to wrap it up and around. Yeah, it's going to be 1 inch. I apologize. 1 inch from the inside score line. So you can kind of see reflected there, the way the light hits my score lines, that we are 1 inch inside the score line. And then we're just going to get that. I'm just going to take my craft knife and get, where I didn't totally get all the way into the corners, to remove that piece. And sometimes I can hit just like spot on and it'll pop right out, and sometimes I have to come back in like this. Not a big deal. Okay, so we're going to pull that out. I think I have prepped my frame with score tape, hopefully. Maybe not. We might be prepping the frame with score tape now. Oh, no, I'm going to glue it. Okay, so apparently I'm psychotic today and I'm gluing this down, which does work, of course, but I don't know why I didn't use score tape. Probably so I can move it to make sure it's lined up exactly in my score lines. But that's okay. So lay that down, kind of burnish it down just with my hands. Try and get any excess glue. And then I'm going to take my craft knife and I'm going to go from those corners and I'm just going to cut on an angle out from those corners. Okay, so then I'm going to take my bone folder, and initially I'm going to kind of make sure everything's glued down. Make sure your glue is dry before you do this. And I'm going to come in there with my bone folder. I'm just going to push those little tabs up against the chipboard and over and down. I'm just burnishing them for now. I will come back and adhere them down in a minute. But for now, you want to burnish it down first before you try to glue it, just to make sure it's all the way over, all the way down, and gives you a nice clean inside portion of your frame there. Okay, so I'm going to continue around the frame and do the same thing on the other 3 sides. Again, I'm folding it over with my hand, coming in with the bone folder, burnishing it up against, and then folding it that final time over and burnishing it again, and then gluing. And then just burnishing that down. And again, I'm going to fold up with my hands, burnish. Apparently part of that didn't stick. Because sometimes it happens. I don't know why. I don't know what I do wrong. You'd think I'd use enough glue. Apparently I don't, but there you go. Okay, so you're just burnishing again, and then we'll glue down. Okay. And the last side again. Burnish it up against the chipboard, burnish it over and down, and then glue. Let's see, this one I didn't get it quite smooth against there, so that's why I'm going back and doing it again. Burnishing out from the middle because I was trying to like push out to where I don't want it on this one side. Okay, so we're going to glue that side down. Okay, now just double checking, and we're going to fold up and over and burnish our corners. Okay, we're going to do this all the way around, and I realize we have scored this, but we still want to do this because we want it exactly where the chipboard is. Okay, we're going to go up and around and up and around. And then we're going to cut on that fold line to the corner. Okay, and then I am going to cut on my first score line. I think I was trying to remember how I did this the last time, so I skipped that for just now. And I think I just cut around initially, but you are going to do another cut here in just a second. Okay, so this is where I'm going to figure out, oh yeah, I do need to cut that off because it's going to be in the way otherwise. So I'm folding my second score line there. Of course I had one that didn't want to fold because of course I did. So what I'm going to do now, I'm thinking there was a reason why I did it this way. Okay, so I'm going to lay this in and make sure everything's folding up and around the right way. So your measurements on how to score this and fold this are for the 3 layers of the foam tape on the top, along with the base part and then those little chipboard pieces on the bottom, and everything so that it lines up where it needs to. So what I'm doing is standing this up on its end, pull the backing off the score tape, and I'm just lining this frame up on the top and then pushing it down. So now I know everything's going to wrap around the way I need it to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a tab. So I'm going to cut all the way up on the score lines on 2 sides and then all the way up on one and halfway up on the other so that I create this little tab. So you can kind of see what I'm doing there. Then I'm cutting off part of that and I'm just leaving the one little square, basically the square in the center of the two score lines you're leaving as a tab. I'm not sure, I think I was probably just checking my measurements. I think that's probably why I didn't cut that initially like I normally would have, but that's okay. It works to do it this way too. Okay, so now we're going to wrap the sides around. So this is very much, well, I do need to do just a tiny bit of mitering from that outside score line on these corners, just so that they don't, and again, this would have been easier had I done this prior to attaching that other piece in there, but I think I was concerned that this was not going to work the way I wanted it to work. And I wanted to make sure, since I had done all of that work on that base piece with the stars and the ink blending and the layering of the little mountains and all of this and the putting in of the lights. And I think I just was trying to make sure that it actually was going to fit. So I'm just mitering those corners ever so slightly, just so nothing's sticking out when ultimately this thing gets all wrapped up and done. So we're going to go around and we're going to glue. And at this point, you're probably saying, hey, Jen, what about your battery pack? You're not going to be able to get to it. Honestly, I realized that after the fact. So I knew where it was, and I did actually have to cut a little access hole to get to where it is. And unfortunately, even though I thought I recorded it, I actually didn't realize I was out of frame when I was trying to do that. So I apologize. It's not going to be on camera, but all I ended up doing was just cutting a little slit into where the battery pack is, the access is to turn the batteries on and off, and just cut that out, and then ended up gluing, making like a little tab that tucks in and gluing that in there so you can pull it in and out and open and close it to get to your switch for your lights. So I'll show that here in just a second where I ended up doing that and how it functions, but unfortunately it did not make it on camera. The flap didn't. I think cutting the opening made it on, but I don't think the little flap thingy I made actually made it on. Anyway, it's fine. So we're gluing our last side here. And you only have to put the glue on that outside tab. You don't have to put it on the part that like wraps around your foam tape and your chipboard and whatnot. You just need it on the back so that it adheres down on the back. So I'm just getting that burnished down, and there is our frame. So really, you know, it's not bad. And this is where I'm like, oh, wait a minute, where's my battery? So I can feel it in there, and I'm literally just taking my craft knife and I'm cutting a hole in the side of my frame. And I apologize that that is off camera, but I was really irritated with myself at that point, and I don't think I realized that I had, you know, moved off camera as I was doing it, because I was trying really hard to get in there and cut that without accidentally cutting a wire or something and having to basically go back to the beginning. And I think I must have realized there I was probably off camera. So I am just getting in there with my craft knife and cutting along the bottom and then up along the sides and removing a piece there. Yep, there we go. Had to make it a little bit bigger than I initially had it. You can see now your battery pack in there. There probably was a better way to have done that, so it was a little bit cleaner, but honestly, like I said, I didn't think about it until it was kind of too late. And still off camera, which again, I apologize, but we're going to turn this little sucker on here in just a second. It's going to look really neat. Okay, so there's where I figured out, oh, I'm off camera. Didn't realize how long I'd been off camera, but there it is. Okay, so I pulled that piece out, so I have what at that point is an ugly little opening there, but I will end up fixing it. Like I said, I fixed it off camera, but I think I show you in the next little part here in just a minute how I then covered it up so it's not so ugly. All right, so there's our opening, and there's our stars, and there's our background. Pretty cool, if I gotta say so. Okay, so at this point I've got my shaker fill in here. These are two from Michael's. There's a little cactus and then these little stars, and these are actually glow in the dark, which I thought was kind of cute. Not that it's ever going to be somewhere it's going to glow in the dark, but they were cute little stars, and I thought that would be kind of fun. So I've got my acetate with my frame, and because of the way we've done this, it's going to be like super easy to just pop this down on top, but the acetate is 8 7/8 by 8 7/8. The outside of the frame is 8 7/8 by 8 7/8. And then just going 3/8 of an inch in and then cutting out that actual frame piece. So I'm actually going to just pull off the backing on one spot. And I'm going to line this up on here, and it does not seem to matter. I have gone over the back side of this with the anti-static tool. I have gone over it with rubbing alcohol. They just get staticky. I don't think there's anything you can really do about it. So, and I'm going to pull my backing off over here, maybe, and get hold of it. Okay. And on this side, again, I'm just going to roll this very gently down on top. And then I will get my top piece. Okay. And there you go. There is the shaker.